Hello, everyone, it's Yuko here. On this channel, I'll be providing information in English because some events happening in China aren't being reported in other countries. The information I'll be sharing is gathered from various media sources, and I welcome your comments on the content of the videos. If you enjoy the videos, please subscribe to the channel and show your support. Let's start with a different perspective on why the Chinese economy is facing problems. It's a fact that the Chinese economy has been deteriorating due to the collapse of the real estate bubble, which is an easily understandable explanation. However, there are many other problems at play. Firstly, it's often said that there are hardly any companies in China that rely on the domestic market. In other words, since the Chinese economy was sustained by exports, if trade contracts, Chinese companies will either go bankrupt or have to downsize. In the past, when China's rapid economic growth was expected, it was often attributed to its large population. The logic was that even if each person only spends 100 yen, if a billion people buy it, that's 100 billion yen. Sure, having such a large number of consumers is impressive. However, there's a major flaw in this argument. Having a large population doesn't automatically mean they all have purchasing power. If everyone is unemployed, there is no buying power, no matter how many consumers there are. So, having a large population in China doesn't just mean there are many consumers, it also means there is a large supply. And when a large number of people work, the supply of goods and services they provide also increases. So, having a large consumer base is not only important, but also whether they can absorb the supply of goods and services. In the past, the focus was on consumption due to the large population. However, few people pointed out whether the huge supply could be absorbed. This is because, in the past, China exported a large number of cheap products overseas using cheap labor. Therefore, it is said that the Chinese economy is dependent on trade. If foreign countries don't buy products from China, these goods would be left unsold domestically. This is a natural outcome, but it also reveals significant policy failures. During the period of economic development, if the Chinese people were mostly prosperous, domestic demand might have been sustained to some extent. However, in China, while a few people are very prosperous, the majority are in poor conditions. The Chinese people often discussed in Japan are those who are moderately prosperous in urban areas. They represent only a small portion of China's population. Most people still don't have enough household appliances. In such a situation, it would be difficult for Chinese electronics manufacturers to sell their products. Ultimately, if exports decrease, companies will either have to restructure or go bankrupt. Therefore, the fundamental problems of the Chinese economy stem from its large population. To support these people, sufficient employment is necessary. To maintain these jobs, China has to rely on exports. However, China has increased its GDP, become increasingly dependent on exports, become arrogant towards foreign countries, and forgotten that trade should be mutually beneficial. This applies to trade with Japan as well. Moreover, there is pressure in the form of harassment. For example, the Chinese Communist Party restricts the purchase of Japanese products, but there are political tensions between Japan and China. As tensions rise, they might not explicitly limit this, but they will delay or disrupt business by making procedures complicated. In normal countries, such actions would also affect domestic companies. Chinese companies importing from Japan are selling what they import in China to survive. However, if China pressures Japan, these Chinese companies will also struggle. This wouldn't happen in normal countries. If domestic companies ask the government to stop affecting them, the government would stop. However, China is a dictatorship. Even if domestic companies are struggling, they will do it if it harms Japan. As a result, Japanese companies are at a disadvantage compared to China. The Communist Party can lose power, so it's understandable that they would be angry. As a result, the Communist Party has allowed unjust situations to persist for a long time while being ignorant. Consequently, the Communist Party has made a big mistake. Trade should be mutually beneficial. As I mentioned earlier, the Chinese economy is heavily dependent on trade, and there is a sense of superiority in trade. Moreover, because this method had a temporary effect, they have the misconception that if they homogenize countries around the world, they will listen to us. However, the countries affected by China's actions are not foolish. They are gradually diversifying and reducing their dependence on China. In such a scenario, China's trade is worsening, and that's our current situation. As mentioned earlier, most Chinese companies cannot survive on the domestic market alone. If they don't engage in trade, China will have surplus goods, and that means they'll have to engage in price competition. This is currently happening, and as a result, many companies are going bankrupt. Even the surviving companies cannot generate much profit. Furthermore, if the unemployment rate rises further, consumption power within China will further decrease. This has thus dispelled the idea that Chinese people will become rich and the domestic economy will boom. The only solution is to increase trade again. The Chinese economy cannot revive without ties to other countries. However, other countries are starting to realize how dangerous China is. China used to be considered as having a rising power globally, but now it's nearly impossible. So, the problems in the Chinese economy are not just due to the collapse of the real estate bubble, there are other significant weaknesses. Moreover, this problem doesn't end here. This explanation may be lengthy, but in China, human life is cheap. In fact, this is a significant negative for the economy. Let me explain with an example. When designing a car, adding safety features increases manufacturing costs. If you compare the cost of adding safety features with the cost of compensation in case of an accident, you'll find that the cost of adding safety features is higher. Therefore, some companies might not add these features. In a normal country, if an accident occurs, punitive damages would be claimed, not just the actual damages. In other words, companies would have to pay additional fines for the negligence of not adding safety features. So, in legal terms, it is a big risk to run a business that prioritizes lower costs than human life. In Japan, most companies do not prioritize the possibility of people dying. The use of punitive damages is not common. On the other hand, China is infamous for concealing death accidents, sometimes even causing accidents to disappear. For example, there was a huge explosion in Tiananmen, and although the number of deaths was very questionable, no one questioned the government's announcement. Therefore, as long as China continues to disregard human life, product quality will not improve. In a market where people's lives are frequently concealed, there is no motivation to make safe and high-quality products. As a result, cheaper products will become more popular, and profit margins will decrease. Therefore, respecting human life is important for the economy. In Japan, there is a culture of respecting human life. However, I believe that stricter penalties are needed for specific crimes in Japan. This is a digression, but in a society that disregards human life, the economy stagnates. I also think that's one of China's weaknesses. That's all for this time. See you next time.